Hello, everyone. This is Justin Smythe from nextbigtrade.com. This is a review of the best performing stocks for the first quarter of 2024 for March 22nd, 2024. As we do on a quarterly basis in the newsletter, we review the best performing stocks, and it's also good to see which stocks were featured in the newsletter. And it's always good to go back and regularly check whether your process is identifying the best stocks. One of the ways I do that is I go on finviz.com and I look at the best performing stocks um, over the past quarter and over the past year, and then I go back and see where were the stage two breakout buy points, and you know was the process able to identify at least a good chunk of these stocks? And it continues to be the case that I think all the principles of stage analysis that identify these powerful breakouts, tend to lead you into a lot of these big winners. And this happens across different sectors and it happens across different cycles in the market. So stage analysis is a good process to find these big winning stocks. And it also gives you a good template to identify the ideal buy point, which is the stage two breakout. So on these charts, I've identified, where in the newsletter these stocks were identified, what issue. And we're starting out with NVIDIA. Obviously, everybody's been talking about NVIDIA this year. It's been the most popular stock in the market. It's one of the most popular stocks I can remember over the last 5 or 10 years in terms of stocks that are just relentlessly discussed. And it's really because NVIDIA's had such a powerful uptrend since the start of 2023. This stock is up 5 times essentially. So it's a huge winning stock in a short period of time. And the recent stage two breakout, the continuation breakout, occurred back at the start of January, where an increase in volume came in and broke the stock out above resistance. And this is really a dream situation for a breakout where the stock just trends above the 10-week moving average for its entire run higher, and it allows you basically to not only not get shaken out by volatility, but it allows you to build a bigger position because you can buy, you can kind of add to it as the trend goes on, and there's no big shakeouts to kind of potentially knock you out of the stock. So this is really a buyer's dream. And there's been a couple of these this year where the stock has just gone straight up since the breakout. And you can see it still hasn't had a down week in 2024. So, one of the best stocks of the year, one of the best breakouts of the year. And you can see it has all the attributes of a high quality stage two breakout. It broke out of a big basing pattern. It had no resistance on the breakout. It didn't have 2 times average weekly volume, but it had a above average volume. It was in the strongest sector in the market, which is semiconductors. So it essentially had everything. It's a perfect buy point for the stock, and it turned into a monster winner for this latest move. Two more semiconductor related stocks. ARM actually broke out in the middle of November out of an IPO base. And IPOs, again, are another thing to look at with these big winners recently. A lot of these stocks are IPOs. So IPOs are really where you want to focus on for some of these new big winning stocks, because they don't typically, people are attracted to new merchandise in the stock market. And that's what happens with IPOs. They kind of attract the attention and the imagination in the market. And ARM came out at a good time for semiconductors, where semiconductors are a powerful leading sector. It IPO'd at the right time, right at the start of the major move higher at the end of October, and then really the big gains were achieved once it reported earnings in February. It blasted off on big volume, but it hasn't been able to get back towards those highs since then. So really the big gains of this move were made after this earnings release, but there was a good buy point all the way back in November. SMCI is the other big winner besides NVIDIA that had the same kind of breakout. It broke out basically with no overhead resistance on massive volume, and the volume continued to ramp up until its recent action here. But again, this one also had kind of a initial move higher, and then it did move back lower on a little bit of volume right after that initial breakout, but then it just reestablished the breakout after it pre-released earnings, and then it just went straight up. So this is another situation, kind of a buyer's stage 2 breakout dream, where you have a monster trend higher over a couple month time frame, big gains are made, and there's not much of a shakeout because you're trending above the 10-week moving average the entire time. Artificial intelligence stocks, there wasn't many of these that were big winners in the first quarter. They really struggled, which was a lot different than what happened last year. SOUN, however, was a big winner. This one broke out of a base, started to break out on an increase in volume in early February, and then really just powered higher after that. Big volume came into the stock, and then recently some big selling volume has come in and beaten it back down. So this one had a sharp, powerful run higher over a 5 or 6 week time frame. APP is another winner in the artificial intelligence software space. Breaks out of the base, pretty much no resistance on this breakout. Above average volume comes in, and then it just trends above the 10-week moving average for multiple weeks. Moving on to some healthcare stocks, biotech stocks, VKTX, obviously monster winner. This year, it had a couple breakouts late in 2023 and then in 2024. And notice how it barely has any overhead resistance when it's kind of making these moves. Then it starts to accelerate higher, and really once it had a news announcement here is where the big gains were made. So again, the stock breaks out. It's not super extended on its breakout, so these are good buy points. And then the trend higher takes it to where really the gains are made, later in the stage 2 uptrend. JANX was a completely different kind of stock where it has a stage 2 breakout, clears a lot of overhead resistance, but then all the gains were made the next week after another news announcement. It pulled back slightly early in that week, and then the news announcement came out, and that's where the gains were made. So this is another kind of a buyer's dreams type of situation where the breakout led immediately into the big gains. And again, this one had minimal overhead resistance on that initial move higher. MSTR in the cryptocurrency space, obviously another well-followed big winning stock. This one did have an early breakout in October on above average volume. And then there was a lot of volatility in these stocks in early 2024. This one came all the way back down to the 30-week moving average, but held it. Then big volume came back in. Bitcoin made its big run, and this stock went along with it. So really most of the gains were made on the second breakout higher on big volume. Carvana's been a pretty nice winner both in 2023 and 2024. In late 2023, it started making a move higher, had a pretty sizable pullback, but then it started breaking out again in early February and ran higher for multiple weeks. Volume wasn't as good here on the move in 2024, but it did have a pretty big move, trending above the 10-week moving average. And consumer cyclical is also a sector overall that had a lot of big winning stocks for the first quarter of 2024. SG is another one of those. This one broke out initially in early February, kind of came back in for 1 week, and then had another powerful breakout on volume, which has led to some big gains over the last few weeks. So this was, a powerful run over about a 5-week time period. CART is another IPO, comes out of its IPO base in early 2024. Volume was kind of a slight increase, but then you had a big spike in volume on this follow-through attempt in early February, which has led to a big run higher over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Again, another recent IPO, another stock that clears all of its overhead resistance, on this breakout, or clears most of it, and then has a big run higher. CAVA, another IPO, consumer cyclical stock, breaks out of a base in late 2023, massive volume. This one's had just a big run higher, basically all this year. Did have kind of a continuation move back here too on an increase in volume. So nice runner here, basically for the entire year in 2024. CROX, another consumer cyclical, broke out in early 2024, consolidated for about 4 or 5 weeks, and barely held its breakout area. Then it really accelerated after a move on volume again off the 30-week moving average. And this one's had a nice run for about 6 weeks in 2024. And finally, another dream situation where you get a powerful breakout that just blasts off higher. ROOT, this one had a massive sideways basing formation, a stock that had trouble following through higher, and then it really blasted off on volume on its breakout. And this just continued to follow through with super powerful volume and price action for about 4 weeks after the breakout, where big gains were made. So short, sharp, powerful rally, financial stock. So the financials have had a powerful move higher, and this was really one of the biggest winners during that move. So overall, you've got some big winners across multiple sectors. Obviously, NVIDIA and SMCI are two of the most popular winners of this cycle, but consumer cyclical, healthcare, biotech also produced a lot of big winners. And again, IPOs were a source of, even though there hasn't been many IPOs, a lot of the ones that were more popular turned out to be some big winners. So that's a good thing to keep in mind going forward, is that, if you get a breakout for an IPO out of a base on big volume, those tend to be some good winning stocks in terms of new stage 2 breakouts.